All right, thank you all for being here today. I am going to start by closing our executive session and resuming our public meeting. This is the Port of Bellingham Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. There are multiple ways to participate, being here in the audience, participating on Zoom, or watching on our live stream. I'll start with roll call. Commissioner Briscoe?
Here.
Make sure your microphone's on.
Here.
Commissioner Bell?
Here.
And Commissioner Shepard is also here. Our first order of business is reading our advisory committee meeting schedule, and then we'll move into public comment. Our first advisory committee meeting is our Marina Advisory Committee, or our MAC. Next meeting is May 9th from 6 till 8 p.m. here in this building, and that's an in-person meeting. Our other advisory committee meeting is the BIAC, or the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee. Their next meeting is not until July 13th at 4 p.m., and you can do that as in-person or on Zoom. Okay, I'll move into public comment next. The way our public comment period works is we ask people to keep their comments to about 3 minutes. Please come up to the podium, state who you are, and thank you for being here. We accept public comments both in the room and from anybody logging in to Zoom. We will have a second option for public comment at the end of our regular business. First person on my list is Jim Kyle.
Thank you, Commissioners. Jim Kyle, 4102 Linnell Road, Deming, Washington. And I'm here to introduce to you Lang Solberg, the new president of the Working Waterfront Coalition. Lang, would you step up, please? And this to introduce you to the staff as well. Hopefully you'll be seeing Lang for a couple, 3 decades in the future. Lang actually was with us at our conception and helped write the original bylaws. Since then, he's been quite busy. He has a family, wife, and 2 young daughters. He also is a 3rd-generation Bristol Bay gill netter, carrying on that tradition. He is now the business development manager for a software company based in Australia that specializes in software used by certain fishing fleets. In addition to that, Lang spent 2 years at the University of Washington, earning, and I'm not making this up, a master's degree in maritime administration. So Lang, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks. Lang Solberg, 1519 Marine Drive, 98225. Thank you, Jim. Big shoes to fill. I've looked up to Jim for a lot of years, and I don't have a lot to say here at the moment except hello to all the commissioners. Thank you, Commissioner Shepard, for joining us at Tide to Table the other week, and great to see you, Commissioner Briscoe, Commissioner Bell, Executive Director Fix. I hope to be chatting with you more here as I ramp up in this role. As president of the coalition, on behalf of our 160 members, I really look forward to a good relationship with all you. I think for us and for the coalition, as Jim mentioned, I've sort of been around since the beginning, and we're a bit of an inflection point. There are a lot of things we can look at, both internally and externally, for some reevaluation, some continued engagement from especially the younger cohort of community members. We have probably one of the youngest boards now that we've ever had on the coalition, which is fantastic. And a lot of input to gather from our members and from those younger board members. So I'm really looking forward to that process. I'm really interested in understanding how we can make better and increase, I guess, sort of private. This is private entity speak here a little bit, but how we can increase our value proposition to our members and continue working toward our mission and our charge as a coalition. Care deeply about the working waterfront, deeply. Born and raised here. As Jim said, for better or for worse, I fish Bristol Bay. I'm also working in technology for the fishing industry, and hope that we can have some good contact from here forward. So I'll reach out to all of you individually via email, and we can begin some of those conversations, and thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Jim, thank you for your your leadership over the past years for the coalition. Thank you.
Okay, next person I have on my list is Sarah Bell.
No relation.
Not that we know
I was
of.
going to ask you.
So I did not know I was on this list, but I'm glad I am because I've prepared remarks. And I say this all with respect. I wrote this out and timed myself to make sure it's under 3 minutes. This is about the scrap metal operation on our front. I first learned about the Canadian-owned multi-million-dollar corporation scrap metal operation because of the noise. It keeps my family up at night, and it forces us to have our windows closed, even during the nicest Bellingham days. After sending the port officials a complaint about it, I'm sorry, due respect, but your canned responses included these points. It created jobs. It is a family-owned business. Bellingham is an active port, which I also heard tonight by another gentleman who works for the port. It is good because it is recycling, and the noise violation doesn't count for them. To each of these points, here's my family's response. ABC Recycling, it's an Orwellian name. They are a Canadian-owned $23 million a year corporation who has already been cited with violations by the Washington State Department of Ecology for polluting the lower Duwamish waterway. That is one that I know of. I'm happy to do research on more. This is something that the Port Commissioners did not tell us, but I'm telling you now. And folks on Zoom, I'm telling you now. The noise pollution and its hideous eyesore is at the center of where our city has been improving the waterfront for years, decades even. We have new businesses coming in, new housing being developed, and even new parks. The commissioners do not want you to question, or so it seems, the cascading wasteland that this will cause. Furthermore, myself and many of my Whatcom County community members have been, or currently are, union employees. We support union jobs. We support business growth. We want an active port. This is not about that. Scrap metal is a known toxic waste and has been documented to cause physical harm to scrap metal waste employees. Furthermore, scrap metal can be toxic to soil, waterways, of which they're documented as violating and polluting waterways in our state, this foreign company. The Bellingham Port Commissioners seem to hope that we don't discover these facts. The noise, the atrocious noise, which I have documented. I made a YouTube video, I have videos on my phone, I'm happy to show you. If nobody here has heard it, let me tell you what it's like. It's exactly what you might imagine megatons of scrap metal being dropped from heavy machinery over and over again. It operates till 3 a.m. And the city has told us, my mayor last week, and my city council person told us that they did not know this was happening in our city until it was happening in our city. So how can we trust you when you sandbagged our own city officials? We had no input on this. My phone, okay. So, yes, I already said that part. Anyway, I mean, this just basically summarizes that very righteously indignant feeling that myself and my community members have. There is lead poisoning, mercury poisoning, all of this dust cloud on a site that we have, as a community, watched get cleaned up, only to see this atrocity. What business is going to want to settle themselves? What local American Bellingham business? I'm not talking about Canadian business. What American business in Bellingham is going to want to put their business next to this eyesore, this noise pollution site? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next person on my list is Luke Vanthoog.
Yes, Luke
Okay.
Vanthoog, 331 North Forest Street. I'm a neighbor of Sarah's. I don't need to echo what she's already talked about. On June 21st, there was an agenda item to kind of review the ABC contract, and I think that meeting got waylaid a bit, and I don't think you got the opportunity to put forth a presentation or a discussion about it that you could have. And I was wondering, I would like to request if the commissioners would be willing to put that back on another agenda item, and hopefully the meeting is a little bit more manageable and you can go through the stuff you wanted to talk to at that time. So,
Which meeting are you referring
I think
to?
it was June 21st.
January, maybe?
Maybe it was January. I was reviewing old videos, and I kind of got lost on it.
Okay, I'll take a look at it, Lucas.
Great,
I'll take a
thanks.
look.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else in the room? Do we have anyone on Zoom who would like to provide a public comment? You can unmute yourself or raise your hand. Okay, hearing none, we will have another. Oh, sorry.
No, I think that's just the cursor.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. We'll have another comment opportunity at the end of our regular scheduled business. I do appreciate the public that comes into our meetings and takes the time out of their day to share their thoughts and provide comment with us. Our next order of business is our consent agenda. Carrie, it's nice to see you, even if not in person. Can you please read our consent agenda?
Sure. Motion to approve consent agenda items A through I.
All right. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Bell?
Yeah, I just have a comment on D. That happened very quickly. I'm happy to see the negotiations go the way they went on the boathouse up in Blaine. Quite frankly, it happened quicker than I thought it would, and it allows us the opportunity to move forward on a structure that was unsafe. So I am absolutely pleased to see the momentum that occurred with the boathouse up in Blaine. So that was just my way of saying thanks to the staff for that.
Okay. Great. Questions or comments, Commissioner
no
Briscoe?
questions.
Okay. And I don't have any questions myself. So, Carrie, if you please.
Motion to approve consent agenda items A through I.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
And Commissioner Shepard is yes as well. Passes 3-0. We will next move on to our presentations. Our first presentation is on the Northwest Innovation Center update, and it looks like we have Mr. Goldberg.
That was an I'm not sure look.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm just here to introduce Diane Kamianka. Diane is the Executive Director of the Northwest Innovation Resource Center, in which the county has funded through us to get her up here in our county. So I'd like to have Diane introduce herself and give you her slide presentation.
Thank you, Don. Good afternoon, everyone. Diane Kamianka, Executive Director of Northwest Innovation Resource Center. Thank you very much for the opportunity of giving you an update. It's been a long while, I think, since I've been here and talking to all of you, so I appreciate the opportunity. And thank you very much for the vote on the consent agenda for our funding. Okay. So just to give you a little quick refresher on the IRC in case some of you are not that familiar with us, but our organization is a nonprofit 501c3 that was started in 2010 by a number of us here in Bellingham. It was a combination of public and private individuals working together who were rather disappointed that there was no organization at that time helping early stage entrepreneurs north of King County. So we wanted to put forth the resources to help our entrepreneurs to be able to flourish in our area and not move down to King County. So we really work on creating the resources to help them move forward. I should mention we also, from the very beginning, it was in our bylaws that we believed that this was a regional effort, that we would benefit from the region in addition to individual counties. So we serve Whatcom, Skagit, Snohomish, Island, and San Juan counties. So we basically help to innovate the entrepreneurs or help innovators with advising them for what they're doing. But the other thing that we found was that there was lacking resources in our area that typically entrepreneurs expect to have. So we wound up putting energy into creating that ecosystem for entrepreneurs in addition to the direct help for the entrepreneurs. These are just some of the programs that we've been working on. We do one-on-one support for individual entrepreneurs. We have, this will be our third year of doing a Clean Tech, Blue Tech Innovation Cohort. It's focusing on clean tech and maritime sustainability activities. Several of the entrepreneurs that we helped, you'll see, have been through that program. We have created a data analytics program that I'll hold off talking about because I want to talk about that a bit more in depth. We have a just-in-time mentoring program. When we first started, we had an issue of figuring out how to help people in a wide variety of industries and help people in a wide geographic coverage. So what we did was come up with a way of helping individuals create a strategy, and then as they hit roadblocks along the way, we could call on the business community to come in and help them over a certain hurdle. And that's worked out really well. The business community in all the counties have really stepped up and volunteered their time. I think in the 12 years, we've had maybe 2 people that said, I really am not interested in doing that. Everybody's been really most generous with their time. The other thing that we'll talk about a little bit is creating the innovation centers, which we call the lab. We have one in Everett, and then we'll talk about what we're doing for the other counties as well. So this is just a sampling of some of the entrepreneurs in Whatcom County that we worked with to show the range of the different ways that we're working with individuals. We've got on the top left, there's a foundry up in Sumas that this entrepreneur went through our clean tech cohort. He came in second in a $1.8 million deal in France. He just found out, so that was pretty crushing for him. But and then we have in the center, you may have seen an article about this a year ago, the TerraTug. It's a semi-autonomous vehicle that he's developed for agriculture purposes, but we thought it would be really good in the maritime industry as well, helping. And then on the right is a marine biologist who actually has a nursery for geoducks and breeds the geoducks and sells the seeds to the growers. And on the left bottom is a young entrepreneur from Blaine area that we're helping with figuring out how to get started growing a kelp bed and developing new strains and markets for that. So just a flare of the variety of things from technical to very practical activities. So talking a little bit about our boot camp. We got started with working with data analytics because in the future for our digital economy, pretty much everything's going to be based on a comfort level with data. So what we wanted to do was accelerate the skill set of the workforce and the understanding of businesses and how to take advantage of data for their business. So we created a boot camp, which is a 20-week program that works with with individuals that may be employed but want to add a skill, or many of our people have been unemployed, and this gave them a chance, especially in the early COVID days, to learn a new skill and move into industries. We have some really great examples. We just had one of these individuals get hired by Boeing, which was a pretty nice to see somebody get a skill and go from unemployed to work as a data analyst at a pretty good salary at Boeing. And so we're on our 3rd program right now. We have been working very hard to find a way to have Whatcom and individuals participate in this. We think we have found a way to help that with some compensation for their tuition through training programs. So we're working on that for this time. And all the individuals that graduate from it, get a certificate from WSU in Everett for completion of their data analytics program. Yeah. So in the data workshop that I mentioned is actually the one for small businesses, small, medium businesses. What it does is help the small businesses understand more what they can use for data. Many people think that they really are very data literate. We were talking to one of the individuals who was the first chief data officer for the FDIC, and said that they did a big survey about are you or are you not computer literate, and the average came back as a 6, and they thought that was a little bit odd, so they started surveying people, and they said, oh, I'm data literate because I know I get this data from here and I put it in this report here, which is kind of like a waste of the use of data, other than of actually saying that you're doing what you are supposed to be doing. So what we've been really working on is how to use data in a predictive basis. So how can you use it to create a strategy to talk about some of the potential failure rates of the equipment that you're doing, or some sort of a future use of it. Because once you get started in that, everything, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of those things that we are starting to hear so much about is dependent on data. So we're trying to work to accelerate both the businesses and the workforce in order to be more data literate so they're effective for the future. In addition to the data analytics, which helps the workforce and the businesses, the other resources that we're working on putting together is a network of innovation centers, which will provide not only the locations for individuals to get their assistance, but have physical incubator space for people to start. We will, in the North Snohomish, the Skagit, and the Whatcom one, we will also have a prototyping workshop that we will work on. The 3 in Everett, in Arlington, and in Skagit County, the buildings are identified. The one in Everett exists. It has existed for several years. The location in Arlington is actually a building owned by the city. We've been working with them because they want to highlight the area that it's in as a core area for economic development and innovation. So we become kind of a piece of that message. In Skagit County, you probably are more familiar with this. The Port of Skagit actually owns the Swift Center. It's 225 acres, so they have a building there that they've been working to put us in. And it will, again, be part of the branding of how they will start using that 225-acre campus. Those 2 locations, because they are identified buildings, were selected by Congressman Larson and Del Bene, respectively, for their earmark. I can never remember the proper political term right now. It's community something funding. But basically, we're on their list to move forward for possible funding to remodel those 2 buildings. In Whatcom, we couldn't include Whatcom in that request because we haven't identified a building specifically yet. We are working with the port and the city and the county to try to find the right location, and also to find the right group of individuals so that the situation that we identify and move to and establish, it becomes meaningful. It's not just an isolated building that's used for innovation, but as in the other 3 areas, it's part of a greater picture for that particular area. So we're still working on finding that right fit in Whatcom, and anybody has suggestions, we're very open to that. So our plan is to announce these later in the year as we get a little bit more comfortable with the federal funding, and hopefully by that time we will have Whatcom identified and included in the communications that's moving forward. So I will stop at that point and be happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Commissioner Bell, any questions or comments?
Just give me a minute.
What kind of grants
It's a total of $3.5 million, 1.5 in Skagit and 2 in Arlington.
Commissioner Briscoe? I'm wondering collaboration with the SBDC. You know, we have a annual presentation
Yes.
from them. It seems like there's quite a bit of overlap in terms of what the two organizations do with both supporting our local business community. Is there any opportunity to co-locate the SBDC with this potential building you're talking about?
We really focus on a slightly different part of the economy. We refer anybody that is doing more traditional business to them, especially if anybody needs bank funding, they're better at that. We're pretty much focused on future technologies, et cetera, so it's a little bit of a different thing. And with wanting to do a prototyping workshop as well, it's going to be a bit of a different environment. So we work with the SBDCs in all the counties, but mostly it's handoffs, and vice versa. They refer people to us, especially if they're inventors.
Good. Okay.
Great.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
And thank you for taking the time to meet with all of us individually. That is important, so thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely
Appreciate that.
catch everybody up.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, our next presentation looks like Mr. Goldberg again. This is a Economic Development Department presentation for their annual commission update.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Once again, Don Goldberg, Director of Economic Development here at the Port, otherwise known as REP. It's a real pleasure to be here today to update you on the past year or so and where we plan on heading. The last few years, as you know, have been mostly responding to the pandemic and North County's federal flood disaster. Of course, we've been involved with many other aspects of the regional economy, which we're going to go over during this presentation. We hope to focus much more in the year to come on our primary responsibility of supporting and creating high-quality job growth. I understand your time is valuable. We have a lot to go over, but I did want to make one more point, and that was to thank all of you, our staff here at the Port, our partners at Team Whatcom, and so many others. As you know, we collaborate with broad stakeholders, private sector, public sector, throughout the county, the tribes, higher ed, school districts, health, nonprofits, and NGOs. And I just want to say how proud I am of everybody. We all collaborated, worked together, and are often cited as one of the best models in the state. So the Regional Economic Partnership here at the Port is made up of 4 FTEs. Myself as the director. We have John Michener, who is a project manager who happens to be not here today because he just got married in Europe. Gina Stark, as you know, is a key player as a project manager and also a program manager of broadband. And then I'd like to introduce to you our newest FTE, Corey Olson. Please stand up, Corey. Corey is going to be our new communication person and associate economic development person. And Corey has a huge, thank you. Corey has a giant background in workforce, and we plan on using some of those skills as we move forward. So as I mentioned, Regional Economic Partnership is what we go by. We couldn't do what we do without our partners. This is a list of the majority of who we work with, plus all the other ones that I mentioned. We can't and don't know everything, so often we're facilitating meetings with others or supporting them. So what is economic development? Because I think a lot of people really don't know. I think they confuse business development with economic development. And there's many types of development. Business development, of course, is focused at the firm level and often is related to sales. Community development relates to households and individuals, but economic development is the umbrella of all of that. It's much broader. It's a programmatic effort to increase and generate wealth, support the creation of quality jobs, and also maintain quality of life. So our intentions as a group are to be highly responsive, to be dynamic in nature, to be inclusive, and most important, we want to deliver. So, and we're doing this through the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or otherwise known as the CEDS. And our CEDS vision is to have a resilient regional economy that has a dynamic, inclusive business, a commitment to living wage jobs and equity, and the physical, social, and economic infrastructure to support it. So our 6 goals, since business and economic development are goal-driven, our 6 goals in the CEDS report are build upon a strengthened Whatcom County-based economy, to develop and enhance critical infrastructure, to develop a skilled workforce, create a relationship between our neighbors, both in Canada and the counties adjacent to us, cultivate an economy of diversity and equity, and then support county-wide economic resiliency and recovery. So some of the deliverables that are in each one of these goals, I'm going to just go over real quickly. Business retention and expansion is recruiting businesses. It falls into goal number 1. But as I've talked about before, we also think it's most important that we support the businesses that exist here today. We don't want to cause grief to an existing business by bringing a competition in from outside. Infrastructure, of course, we need better infrastructure, and we're working to support that so that housing, childcare, and commercial buildings can be built. And then creating a workforce that is that meets the needs of the community. Goal number 4, our Canadian, from Canada, we recruit businesses from there. Many of our largest companies here in town started out as Canadian companies and then became American companies. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the root of what we do, and we feel that it should be included in all of the things that we work on. And then, of course, resiliency. We talked about resiliency 4 years ago before the pandemic, and we were talking about mostly the big earthquake, the tsunami. We weren't thinking about pandemics, but now we realize that there are physical resiliency requirements as well as health and others, and so we're supporting those. Some examples of work that we've done for deliverables. Corvus Energy, as you know, a recent company that we brought here from Norway. They are the world leader in battery technology for the maritime industry. Canature Kitchen is a company that started in Canada, and we helped bring them to Linden. They're currently building a 220,000 square foot state-of-the-art pet food manufacturing facility, the largest of its kind in North America. Vicinity Motors Corporation, a truck and bus battery company, electrification company in Ferndale, which will be, I believe, opening very soon. And then retention, we've contacted over 120 businesses, and we've assisted them with many things, whether it's working with organizations like Diane's, SBDC. We partner with everybody. And then we're starting to do quarterly reports. Corey will take that to the next level. And of course, we did a lot of work on disaster grants. And then recently, you were lucky enough to hear from Aegis Mobile and the incredible story of their growth. The last item is the revolving loan fund. Just to give you a couple of examples, Tidal Vision got a $75,000 loan in 2017. They had 5 employees. They paid back their loan in 2022. In 2023, they have 68 employees, and they're growing rapidly. Without that loan, they may not have been here. And then, of course, Aegis Mobile, 2022, $125,000 loan with 6 employees. They have 11 employees now. They're growing quickly. We just gave them a second loan. That's what that program's for, and it makes us really proud to see young, small companies stay here and grow. Some of the things that we're working on now is Cherry Point. When I started my job here, I saw Cherry Point as an incredible opportunity. It's very complex, but it still is just an amazing resource. So we are working very closely on helping the county and the private sector work on infrastructure. There's some major news that's come out, most of you are aware of. BP has announced a $1.6 billion expansion into green energy. They're going to build a plant that can use green energy to supplement their fuels for aviation. AltaGas, who bought Petrogas and all of the property from Alcoa, has announced that they're going to start working out there, and they're working towards building a potential green energy plant there themselves. There's a Norwegian fish company that is looking at building one of the largest on-land Norwegian Atlantic salmon facilities. And these are the size of oil tanks, but they're filled with fish, and they can grow salmon in under a year to maturity. They've just finished completing the first one in Norway. They're going to have one in South Korea, and they're hoping to have one here in Cherry Point.
Where were they going to site that?
Excuse me?
Where were they going to locate that?
In Cherry Point on the Schechter property right off of Henry.
So not on one of the industrial sites, but
It is an industrial site.
But it's on the Schechter. It's not already developed.
No, it's raw land right now. Yeah. We're trying really to focus on some of the sectors that haven't had a lot of our help. So ag is one of them. So right now we're currently trying to work with the Berry Commission and other parts of the ag community to support them in an ag research facility. Most people don't realize that our county has more ag land than Skagit County, but where our economy is a little bit more diverse, and we're one of the few agriculture counties that does not have a research center. So this would be in coordination with the Bread Lab in Skagit County and WSU. Of course, we have to focus on the marine trades, and so we're supporting the new marine trades apprenticeship. We're working with Maritime Blue to bring in some more cluster organizations that might feed off of our Corvus Energy. Of course, all the marine trade businesses that are locally here we're supporting, and we've already gone over Corvus Energy. And the Fisherman's Pavilion that we built recently is now starting to get a lot of activity, and then the shipping terminal reactivation. So goal 6 is resiliency, and I mentioned this earlier. Now we're really taking resiliency to the next step. So disaster preparation, response to disasters, economic diversity to our region, and then sustainable innovation. And we're working, of course, with partners, as I said, Health Department, Emergency Management, WWU, and the list is in front of you. So, of course, 4 people can't do it all, but we want to be a catalyst to everybody. Small business grants. As I mentioned in the earlier part of this presentation, Our team has been focused mostly on grants this last couple of years. We have put out tens of millions of dollars to the local businesses through Working Washington 1 through 5 from the Commerce Department, hospitality grants, and then most recently the disaster grants that Representative Rule was able to get $10 million for 3 counties. Approximately $7 million of that came to Whatcom County, and many businesses, I believe, were saved because of it. As a matter of fact, I gave this afternoon Director Fix a card from one of those people that thanked us. Infrastructure is super important. We're working heavily on broadband. Gina Stark has been doing a great job raising money. The knowledge that she has learned in the last 3.5 years is incredible, and we're leading that charge. Economic development, the EDI, or the .09 fund, is now allowed to work on housing, so we were part of that process. And then, of course, housing itself. We all know that worker housing and low-income housing are in very bad need in the community. We work on it because a company cannot expand here or come here if they don't have a workforce. Child care, the same. And then we're continuing to work on our GIS database, which is setting a platform for the entire county and has unlimited layers that it can grow.
Can I ask about the child care initiative? Do we have a seat at that table as the port?
So we're working, I guess, Commissioner, yes and no. We're working with most of those who are at the table. So Debbie All and a number of organizations that specifically work on that, including Business and Commerce and others, but we are not a leader in that role. We're a supporter.
So basically, as close as we come on that is Clark. Is Clark a part of that?
Clark is that for Business and Commerce, yeah. And Debbie All as well. The reopening of the border was a major positive impact to this region. We all know how much we depend on that border. Approximately, I think, 11.5% of our sales tax comes from Canadians coming down here. I had to go to a funeral in Vancouver yesterday, and when I came back at 6:30, I just am very happy I had a Nexus Pass because that line was enormous. But they're down here, they're shopping, they're supporting our businesses, and we are one community, and we really felt the hit when that border closed. So it's been a really good thing to open, and I hope that it doesn't close down again. So to just quickly, what's next? We're going to finish working on, or we're going to continue to work on getting finished industrial land in our portfolio in this county. We're going to continue to work on broadband, housing, child care, and our typical BR&E. We want to make a more resilient community and know that we can respond quicker. We're going to continue to work on workforce, but now that Corey's here, we're going to really step that up to another level. And then we're going to still work on how are we going to address the worker shortage here. So this is how you can get a hold of us to the public, and that's it. I'm here to answer any questions. It's been a full year.
All right, well, thank you for the update, Don. Any questions or comments, Commissioner Briscoe? I have.
You can grow a fish from an egg to a full adult in a year. It's Mother Nature 3 times. Anyway, that's my only comment.
I thought that would pique your interest.
I put it out there for you.
Will the Atlantic salmon growth operation impact the local Pacific salmon operations in the area?
Oh, I'll repeat the question. So there was a question from the audience about the impacts for raising Atlantic salmon and competition for local fish stocks. From what I heard, that this is a land-based enclosed operation, which is significantly different from a net pen-based one that would be in the aquatic environment. And I think we would have a different response. Our partners, certainly at the tribe, would have a much different response if this was a net pen operation.
Exactly. And net pen not only has the opportunity for escapage, but it also pollutes the water. So this is all bringing fresh water in and then cleaning it, taking the fertilizer out, and then putting back clean water. The Norwegians are leaders in the world in this, and they're actually have just completed, as I mentioned, the first one of these. And the growth is quicker than they thought, Commissioner. And the quality, they did a tasting, I wasn't involved, but the quality of the fish was supposedly the highest of any farm fish.
This isn't the first time. In Chile in the late 60s through the 70s, they all their ponds were on.
Mike's not on, Bobby, sorry. Your mic.
In Chile, they started this in the late 60s, mid 70s with our coho eggs from our streams here. They've been doing, the Chileans were the first ones to do this, and I think the Norwegians are copying them now.
Okay, we'll look forward to that one. Commissioner
Yeah,
Bell?
just a little more detail on the Intalco site. Just maybe a little broader idea of what the timeline is, where things are from a
Yeah.
status standpoint.
So the Intalco site, which is owned by Alcoa, approximately 1,200 of those acres were transferred to Alta a couple of years ago. At the same time, Alta bought Petrogas. Alta was a 1/3 owner of Petrogas at that time. They're now own the complete operation, as well as the purchase of 2 years ago. Alcoa has officially closed the Intalco facility permanently now, and will start a cleanup operation. And when that cleanup operation is completed, Alta has told me that they are under option agreement to purchase that property, which they intend to do.
Don, do you know, I know we've participated in the national competition to be a hydrogen hub. Do you know the timeline for finding out the status of that application?
I don't. It's, I believe we're going for $1.2 billion to be one of the 4 hubs. Cherry Point, I believe, has a very good chance to be one of those winners. Washington put in, I believe, 3 applications. But Cherry Point has a terminal because Alta bought Petro's terminal, so they have the ability to ship out of there. They have multiple rail there, and they have quite a bit of power, so and a large property. So I don't know I don't think anybody knows the actual timing of when the Fed will make a decision, and whether they're going to keep it to 4 or whether they'll split it up to be more. But I think Washington State has a really good chance.
Yeah, from what I've seen of the proposal, it's quite good, and they're connecting both production and use all within the state, which seems to be a good recipe. It's real money. I mean, that's a substantial amount of money, so
Exactly.
I'm glad we're working on that, and please keep us updated.
Yeah, one of the proposals is to actually have hydrogen refueling sites all along I-5. And we've also talked to them about having the ability to have hydrogen charging stations along the water for future ships.
Commissioner Briscoe?
When you said there was ample power available, is that guessing that BP would come through with juice for their production there? Or is it power that's already in place that they have?
The Alcoa facility has about 400 megawatts of power capabilities. So when they shut down, that left that capability for Cherry Point. There's some old equipment there and things of that nature. BP has, the PUD has let me know that BP has put an application in to the BPA for potentially 200 megawatts of additional power for their increase.
I was kind of wondering how they're going to divvy things up out there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the PUD will be heavily involved in that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm curious about, a couple of years ago, we had a really difficult time recruiting people because of the housing shortage. And I know there were a couple of firms from Canada that were ready to settle here but couldn't find appropriate housing. Do you see any light at the end of that tunnel with the amount of housing that's coming to play, not only on our waterfront, but also in the city of Bellingham? And have any of those firms that went away 2 years ago showed a desire to come back?
There's a few of them that we're still working with them. They haven't entirely gone away. They just are fishing a little, and they're also looking at other locations. I think the apartment situation in Bellingham seems to be getting better, but most of them are quite expensive. Some of them, we're getting the high and the low, and not that many in the middle because there's not much funding for that. In my opinion, the bigger problem we're having right now is multiple companies that are here that we want to grow here, who want to grow, have no business facilities to grow into. There's no industrial units. Unlike most larger markets where developers will spec buildings so that they're available, we're not traditionally that type of market, and we probably need to grow into that. They can't wait 3 years to get into a building. So many of the tech companies that have been brought here are growing rapidly, and my biggest fear is they'll leave because we can't accommodate their growth.
And you say that's a concern above and beyond housing at this point?
I believe so.
You think they can work out the housing?
Housing and childcare are, a consistent issue throughout the country and our state everywhere. But the lack of industrial buildings is pretty problematic to this region.
And going back to Cherry Point, do you think you've got enough land available in Cherry Point to accommodate that need? If it were to go that direction?
If the land was developed, yes. But Cherry Point is mostly focused on very large institutional users. It's not where most 25 or 50,000 foot buildings would be built. There aren't that many services there, so it tends to be large campuses, and there's a demand for that. So one of the things I'm doing right now is working closely with the city of Ferndale to help them get grants from the state and the Fed to expand their industrial portfolio.
So do you think we need not just land that's available to build those, you think we need ready-made buildings that are ready for companies to expand into?
I do. All the markets I've ever worked in, there's always been developers that would build a building for a user, and at the same time they would build one speculative so that they could lease it out. A great example is in Troutdale, when I worked at my previous employer. We did an Alcoa cleanup, and there was a 10-acre site there that was sold to a developer who built a 400,000 foot building on spec. And a month after it was completed, a company moved in there who would not have moved to Oregon if it wasn't ready.
Okay.
All I got.
All right. Anything more?
One more question, Don. Other than Ferndale, what do you see as good speculative grounds for building or putting something that's shovel-ready, so to speak, as we've done before?
Yeah, well, Cherry Point, if we can do some large sites. Blaine has a couple of sites left. You can see the demand. Ferndale's a great example. Faber Construction had some land. They put it on the market and went through and built a number of buildings. One of them is Vicinity Motors, because that land was ready to go and they were ready to develop it. On the other side of the freeway, otherwise known as Starving Sam, he had a bunch of land and developed spec buildings there, and every building that was, by the time it was built, was full. There aren't that many industrial parcels that are left that aren't inhibited with wetlands or some other problem. But there are parcels ready. We just need to have a developer be able to come in and develop it out. And that gets back into infrastructure and the cost of development and how time-consuming it is.
I would just add 2 sites to that, one being the airport. We have plenty of industrial lands at the airport that could be developed. Now, we can't sell those lands. They can only be leased, so that's a turnoff to some, but other people have accepted it. And it's a model that's worked in the past with Woodstone. And then the Log Pond area down at the GP site is another place where we could put light industrial buildings.
Exactly. And both of those situations, I mean, we push the airport sites because it's a great parcel. It's a professional business park. It's in a great location right off the freeway. And we're looking forward to the GP site being ready to go.
That airport site, it's been on the market for a little while, but no one's really bid. I think it would be probably a different situation if we took the risk and built that building and made it move-in ready. We would probably have it rented in a week.
Yeah, we designed a few buildings out there, but I know Elliot and his team are now working on getting through some land use things that are out there. Some are affected by wetlands. Others have restrictions on them, and as Director Fix said, they're leased land too, and some companies are not willing to go on there.
Well, I think that's a good discussion to have at some point too, because if we can build our own and go spec with an industrial building, that's a wise choice, but it also would also be wise for us to take a look at what could we sell it for if we're going to sell it. If somebody was really going to come in here and do a project like that, why wouldn't we sell it and go buy a site like we did at Marine Drive, right? We could go buy something different with the revenue from that.
You could sell the building, you can sell the land at the airport. You have to keep the land.
Sunil.
I think that
Sunil?
Don makes a good point with, somebody has to start this. And, that's part of what we're charged with is the economy in this county. And if we can show other investors that this type of thing would work, building the buildings, as you said, happened in Oregon, I think it's something we need to have a serious discussion about.
I'm in favor, and I think it's what we're here to do, so yeah, that would be a discussion I would readily entertain.
And we can see that on Marine Drive, our newest asset. There's a tremendous demand for that property, and those are older buildings. If that was a brand-new business park, it would be full.
So do we know what happened with the cement plant? Who owns that now? Or who has it?
Lehigh still owns most of it, but they sold part of it to ABC, and ABC is moving.
Right, the roadside.
Mm-hmm. But Lehigh kept the balance of it. As far as I know, they didn't sell that.
That's correct.
You know what their intentions are with that? I don't. We should probably keep a finger on that.
I believe McMinman's is looking here. I thought of that would be a kind of a cool hotel site, kind of funky like they do.
Where the cement plant is?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Don.
You're very welcome.
Lots of good stuff to think on. Any other questions or comments here?
I have none.
Okay.
Thank you, Don.
All right, our next item is a Q1 financial report from Tamara.
Oh, I'll let you get that.
All 10, right?
All right, Tamara Sobczak, CFO, Port of Bellingham. We are going to switch gears from all that economic development good stuff and look at first quarter financial results and a couple of other updates. So this time we'll jump right into the financial side of things. The first quarter revenues came in at $11.4 million. That's port-wide total. 6.8 of that was from our operating divisions. Compare that to a year ago, 6.1 from our operating divisions. So we've recovered quite nicely. Look, you can see the non-operating piece of that puzzle, the yellow pie. 6.3 last year of non-operating versus 4.1 this year of non-operating, and that's really due to those large construction grants that we had in progress last year that we don't have today. Looking at expenses, we came in at $10.5 million for 2023 Q1 compared to $9.1 million same time last year. And I took a look to see if there's just something very specific that kind of increased, but it really was across the board. As we all know, expenses are rising just everywhere. So diving into each division, looking at the airports, revenues, so the green column is Q1 2023, the beige is what we budgeted, and then the blue is what happened same time last year. So revenues came in well above budget and above what we did last year, and that's really due to concessions and parking, just a busier airport. Expenses came in a little under budget and just slightly above where we were last year, and this is pretty much expected. We had a couple of vacancies at the ARF, our firefighters, and we filled those in April, so we'll see those costs increase as the year progresses.
Quick question on the airport revenue. How much of that was a result of the increase in the parking fees versus volume increase? When did we do the $14?
That was 4 years.
4 years ago?
Yeah.
We haven't had a rate increase in years since pre-COVID.
It's been a while since I've parked in the long-term parking.
Well, I parked this weekend, so you can thank me.
I did last week, and yeah, it was 4 years ago, obviously.
Charge you extra for your truck, but
Okay, that'll come forth. So I did want to take a look and see if I could forecast the year. So now that we're getting back to normal, I wanted to see if I could kind of try to predict where we'll be at the end of 2023. So based on Q1.
This is normal?
What's normal?
This is normal? Now that we're back to normal?
The new normal.
We're normal?
Yeah, we're the new normal. Yeah, so I looked at Q1 year over year, and we are 5% over revenues at the airport year over year for Q1, and so we should exceed our budget and well exceed prior year at the airport, so great news. And then expenses, we expect to come in right at budget. So moving over to the marinas, revenues were down a little bit in 2023, but slightly over budget. This is a consistent pattern as, you know, the marinas are a heavy summer season. So trending from first quarter, revenues and expenses both expect to exceed budget by year end, but we expect revenues to exceed just a little bit better, so bottom line a little bit better than we expect. So good news so far. Moving over to the shipping terminal, revenues came in lower than budget, higher than previous year. This is seasonal. It's a little bit hard to predict because it's a growing operation, and we were very much more busy at the end of last year, so the math doesn't really translate. But I am told that we may fall a little bit short on our predictions. We were a little optimistic on our budget, but we should come in fairly close. And then expenses, of course, coming in just as expected.
Sorry, but one of the reasons for that, I think, is because the Rock is so seasonal. The Rock tends to go out in the summertime, so we get a lot more.
Well, the nice thing is we now look at revenue line, and it is above the expense line. And it's been years since that's happened.
Years.
So, yeah.
Okay, looking at the cruise terminal, this is just year over year, steady business, similar level to 2022. Net income consistent is year over year, and we expect that to continue. Our real estate division, that's what I do with my notes. Real estate division, revenues and expenses for Q1 are close to expected. So as far as forecasting to the end of the year, we do have some information that tells us we may come in a little bit under budget for revenues, as one of our tenants is a little slower. And also, this will be interesting to see how 742 Marine Drive affects the revenues and expenses for this division. So a little difficult to forecast on this one.
Can you go back to that one just because it's so pretty? This is what they should all look like. So notice the budget for the revenue is slightly higher than the past year, and then the actual numbers are slightly higher than the budget. And then you go to expenses, and the actual expenses are less than the budget. And you go to the income, and they're higher than the budget. This is as good as it gets right there.
If we could all be as good as real estate.
We can spend more if you like.
No, wrong column. Okay, and looking at our waterfront, revenues and expenses, obviously very close to budget. If I do the math for forecasting, looks like revenues might come in a little bit over budget and expenses a little bit below. So another fairly good news story. And then other public, this is economic development, open space, those types of things. Revenues at budgets and expenses include our public spaces. So we expect those costs to kind of raise in the summer months as we do more of our maintenance on our outdoors, parks and things. And then for forecasting, we expect this to come in right as expected. And all of that leads to a strong balance sheet. I do need to explain this balance sheet a little bit for those of you who remember what it looked like the last time I presented. So total assets, that third line down, is $504 million. When I presented a couple months ago, the year end, that number was about $420 million. So total assets minus total liabilities goes to your net assets, and that bottom net assets is similar, comparable. So very strong balance sheet. But I want to explain what that $80 million difference is. So the Governmental Accounting Standards Board set a new rule that says you have to report your leases differently. So for example, if we have, shaking his head, I can see you shaking your head. I just feel like I have to explain this because it's so different. So if we have a tenant and they have a 5-year lease with us, and then they have say an option to extend for 5 more years. What we do today is we say in March, we recognize March revenue, right? We earned it, they paid it, great, March revenue. Now the GASB says, okay, that's fine and good, but you have to record that 5-year lease plus the 5-year option as a receivable on your books. So that's what we have to do. I wouldn't, but I don't run the GASB.
Even though the 5-year option is not even exercised.
If we reasonably expect that they'll exercise it, we have to book it.
If we reasonably, so we have to make a judgment call.
Yes.
As to whether or not we think somebody is going to be in business and extend their lease.
Yes.
And not move out.
Yes. So if they've been a long-term tenant, we can reasonably assume that they will probably still be a tenant.
And the purpose for them wanting to increase the value is what? Do we get taxed on that?
No.
I mean, we're not a taxable entity.
Right. They say.
What possible purpose?
They say it's for comparable, to compare industry over industry.
Remember that housing crash we had not too long ago where they were assuming all that? That's kind of what we're doing now.
So that's the asset side. We have that side. But they also said, hey, we also know that you haven't earned it yet. So we have to put on a liability as, I'm going to call it an unearned revenue, right? So the long-term asset increases 80 million, the long-term liability increases 80 million, and that's why you get your net assets consistent.
It's actually not. Unearned revenue is a real deal, but that's just being misused here. An example of what it would be used appropriately would be...
This is called deferred inflows.
Right.
I just didn't want to confuse.
Right. But an unearned revenue would be, we did a lease for the Bellwether and they paid us up front. Well, that's unearned until the lease runs out. But this is just a total, I don't even know what it is.
It's job security. Yeah.
They'll change it back in a few years.
Okay. All right, so. All right, so thank you for letting me explain that. All right, so moving out of the financials, we have about $14.5 million in federal securities listed there. The average yield on those is 3%. I'm happy to report I was able to purchase an investment in April that has a coupon of 5.35%. So I'm going to continue to look for those opportunities as they arise. Obviously, it's callable, so it probably will get called. But in the meantime, we're earning some decent interest. And then the balance in the LGIP is 44.8 million. Net earnings rate at the end of March was 4.76. I took a look at April's statement, and it's almost 5%.
So when they call that, what's your default then at that point? Do you just renegotiate another term?
Well,
So would you go back to a 4 or 3%?
We would just continue to look for other opportunities to reinvest that. Yeah.
At whatever the market rate was at the time?
You would go into the LGIP in the short term.
In the short term, but hopefully I could turn that around and do something higher. Okay, so shifting gears again, we have a couple of open claims against the ports. We had a slip and fall claim at the Bayview Center building in June of 2019. That remains open, and I don't have any update. Our legal team and insurance is handling that one. And then obviously we still have that December 22 winter storm damage that's outstanding. We're still continuing to gather costs, and then we'll submit reimbursement to our insurance carrier once those are complete. And then the stormwater program, both the airport and shipping terminal permits are in compliance, including training and record keeping. The airport sample results were within permit limits. And then at the shipping terminal, there were 6 exceedances at just 2 locations, copper, zinc, total suspended solids, and turbidity. Those responses have been completed per permit requirements. And then just to note, items identified in the ecology inspection last November have all been addressed. Our safety report for the first quarter, we had 2 injuries. One of them was no time loss, and then one of them was 3 days time loss. And there have been no work-related illnesses during the first 3 months. And then finally, our public records request, we had 36 year to date. Same time last year was 38, so we're right on track with where we normally see things. And we only have 2 large open requests at this time. One is communications regarding the port and Harcourt, and then one is regarding communications regarding the PUD and broadband. So those are our 2 largest outstanding ones. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you very much, Tamara. Commissioner Briscoe?
Can we back up to the terminal, the stormwater, our compliance is there?
Yeah.
And Brian could probably help answer this question. Our stormwater for the terminal, the entire terminal area, is collected into our stormwater system, and goes into the ASB pond, correct?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental Planning Services, and Elise Cords may be on Zoom as well, as she could answer some more specifics for our stormwater manager. But yeah, the log pond area all drains to the ASB, but the terminal actually has treatment systems that treat it on site and then discharge to Bellingham Bay. So that there's kind of a dividing line from where what drains to ASB and what drains to treatment systems.
And these copper, zinc, total suspended solids, and turbidity, sometimes we have that, sometimes we don't, depending on the time of the year. Is that?
Yeah, and with increased operations, we're just seeing elevated concentrations, and what's to be expected. There's lots of ways we can look at how to respond to that through best management practices, additional sweeping. There's a tiered approach as you go through the permit compliance. So I don't know, Lisa, are you online? Did you want to address that maybe a little better?
Yes, I am online, the permit takes a step process. So if you have an exceedance 1 quarter, there's a operational corrective action that would take place. And so in this case, this is the first quarter of 2023, and so we have triggered a level 1 corrective action, and we have done the operational items to address those exceedances. And then the permit goes further. If you have an exceedance in the second quarter of the same parameter, then you would do something structural at the terminal, something to address the issue structurally, such as covering or making berms to prevent run-on or runoff. And then even if you had it for a third quarter, it would be a level 3 corrective action, and that would involve treatment.
Thank you. So I guess what I'm getting at is lately here, the last couple months, there's been some statements made that our water runs into the bay directly off of the ground on our whole terminal site, the whole site over there. And I wanted to clarify that with yourself and Alice by saying that that's not the case.
That's right.
There's
Yeah.
no water runoff that enters the bay without going through some kind of treatment to catch something if it gets loose. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, the whole log pond area drains to the ASB, which does not discharge to Bellingham Bay at all. It's completely closed off, and it just evaporates from the ASB. And then the terminal itself, there are wharf treatment units. There's other treatment units along the edges of the terminal that then collect that water and treat it and discharge it. That right now we're seeing elevated concentrations, but so we have the tiered approach that Elise described that then help us address those through the permit and working closely with ecology on those steps.
Okay, so, and then also on our dock, we got catch basins on the dock as well.
That's right. Yeah, we call those the wharf treatment units. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, because there seems to be some belief out there that we're running things into the water from our operations over there. That is untrue. And I knew it was untrue, but I wanted staff to explain it, so it came from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Thank you, Brian.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Elise.
Follow up on the stormwater. When we met last, we had some discussion about the permit. I believe ABC taking their own permit and us taking our own permit. Is that still in operation, and how does that impact sampling? Will they do their own sampling and we do our own sampling? Do they report back to us? Are you going to include that in future reports? How are we going to know?
We're working with ABC and the Department of Ecology on that right now. So we have an umbrella permit that covers the log pond area that, in our opinion, that could also cover operations like ABC. The Department of Ecology determined that they would want ABC to get their own industrial stormwater permit. And so that's a process that ABC is initiating right now. They'll work closely with ecology on how to sample that, how to collect it, treatment that if needed, and then that would discharge into the ASB system, which would be pretty redundant because that would also go to the ASB, which is not being discharged to the bay. But that's ecology's determination that would be the appropriate permit to overlay with ASB or with ABC's operations. So that's in the works right now to determine the exact details of that. So once that application's made, then they'll work with ecology. It takes some time. Like when we established our ISGP at the shipping terminal, it took a bit of time to get ecology to understand exactly where the water goes, how it's collected, where we would sample it, and for what parameters. And so it's a process of getting that permit established. But that's underway right now.
And for the sampling, would we hear about the sampling if ABC is doing the sampling?
Yeah, we definitely could. Those are all publicly available through Ecology's stormwater database. So, but we'll work really closely with ABC right now anyway. So that would be something we could share and work with them on. I'm sure, whether it's just requesting that data or going online and getting it.
But I don't want to create the misconception here that ABC is operating they're operating under our umbrella.
That's right.
With ecology overlooking it.
Yeah, and they're responding to ecology's request to initiate their own permit process.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
Any other questions for our Q1 financial report?
No, I haven't. And very good as usual.
Thank you.
Can you go back to the waterfront district? We did a little better in revenues last year. Did we start earlier? Was there more activity? Is there a reason why we didn't do as much revenue this year on the waterfront?
I don't know that, but if you look at the scale, it's so tiny. It's probably $10,000. I can look more closely and get back to you.
Sorry, pulled a Bobby. The Container Village opened earlier last year, but it was only like 2 weeks. So we'll look into that and get back to you and see what those numbers are.
I'm glad you're keeping an eye on me and you got that down.
And also the prognosis for this is better going forward because we've got a lot more leases coming up. We've got more food trucks. We've got a lot more activity down there this year. So this is looking good. Okay. That's all I had.
Okay. Thank you very much. Our next presentation is going to be a Squalicum Creek update, and we have Kurt.
Let's see, good evening. How do we get back to the actual? Yeah. Okay, there they are. Thank you. There we go. Okay, good evening, Commissioners. Kurt Baumgarten, Port Bellingham Environmental Planner. And this brief presentation is in response to Commissioner Shepard's request for more information about kind of status of things down at Lower Squalicum Creek from last, from last month. And so tonight we'll look at the current conditions down there. It's important to look at a little history of the site, to kind of take a look at how the creek's been moved around over the years, and kind of helps look at some of the future remedy there. Some of the current project engagement going on, and then recent activity and next steps. So just by way of orientation, looking down there, we have the BNSF mainline bridge. That would form kind of the border of where a project would start. That's kind of a non-negotiable in this area, because you can't really change the elevations below or of the actual line. Then there's the Roeder Avenue Bridge, the BNSF spur culvert that services Mount Baker Products, and then our port truck bridge that helps bridge between two parts of the leasehold for cold storage. So just because people don't often get down into these areas, it's kind of good to kind of understand a bit about what they look like. And so looking upstream from the truck bridge with the culvert in the background there, you get a sense, this is at a lower tide, because that is a tidally influenced area. You get a sense of what the environment is like there. It's highly modified, I would say. And then looking downstream at the Roeder Avenue Bridge, it's a multi-cell culvert itself. And it's important to note that between the two structures, being the BNSF culvert and the Roeder Avenue Bridge, it's pretty much a concrete line channel. So when we're looking at habitat and flooding issues, concrete line channels convey water faster, which can cause it to build up if there's an obstruction further downstream, and they're not the most friendly for fish passage. So looking at the culvert itself, which is really a main focus of this kind of early effort here, it was built in 1909 by the Bellingham Terminal and Railway Company, so way pre Burlington Northern, and it's really a sticky wicket, if you will, in the whole stream system. Because of the way it's sized, it's unclear if it was ever sized for its current task. And it also really serves to kind of strain out any material that comes down during heavy flows. And so things really rack up behind it and can have some fairly substantial consequences. For example, November 2021, we saw a pretty large event that demonstrates something I've probably mentioned before that we've looked at with our coastal storm modeling, is basically this concept of coastal squeeze, where you get a lot of water coming down from increased rainfall. You have increased storm surge or high tides, and water has to go somewhere, right? And so this is what we're looking at here and there in that area, unfortunately more frequently. King tide events, a lot of folks have seen this in that area. It becomes pretty impassable. And then, so how do we get here? So looking way back, and this is an interesting photo, one, because it's a cool historic photo of the area, but it shows some of the original geomorphology, where there was a bit of a hook where the creek actually outlet. And so I'd like you to look at is where kind of the culvert location, and that the stream itself, the creek, was able to still have somewhat of an estuary area because the railroad trestle was it was a trestle, it was open compared to what we have today. Here again, you can see that an open trestle, not in the foreground, but down at the, to the left of the actual arrow, blue arrow there in the actual culvert. That in contrast with more contemporary view of that area where things were really more built up, and in this case the creek was actually pushed up to where the inner harbor is now. So you can see most of the flow wasn't going through that current culvert. It was going up, and again there was still somewhat of an estuary out in that area. In 2013, the port, Mike Hogan's project here, we removed quite a bit of material. I can throw a couple stats at you. Just 77, creosote pilings, 240 linear feet of concrete bulkhead, 2,200 plus cubic yards of industrial fill, and then installed 10,000 square feet of riparian vegetation and almost 9,000 square feet of, cubic yards of fish mix, which would be that pocket beach that you can see. Let's go back here. The pocket beach that you can see formed right here. So that was a pretty substantial improvement to the estuary area for habitat. Currently, we're looking at some further improvements that would really address the flooding and fish passage issues in the channel itself. And right now, the port is working closely with the city's current project lead. And then the railway, BNSF has actually stepped up and is more part of conversations. I'll explain a little bit of that. And then, of course, with our Bellingham Bay Action Team and the cleanup sites.
Say what you just said again.
Was it the railroad conversation or the comment? Yeah, BNSF's actually been more engaged in this type of project.
No.
This is what I'm told, yes.
That's a breakthrough.
We actually met on site, and BNSF had one of their contractors meet to discuss the project.
Hallelujah.
So that's encouraging, for sure. I mean, that definitely gives this project more legs, say, than if they weren't, right? And then Department of Ecology, our Bellingham Bay Action Team, they're very supportive of this work. And then we've also been in conversation with Cold Storage, Mount Baker Products, and the Gaston Bay folks who are keenly interested in the flooding down there. So recent activity in the port, 2023 strategic budget, we inserted an objective that basically opens up, for us to start working on this. So that's already in there. Some earlier port initiatives, we talked about the Cosmos project. We've worked on vulnerability assessment for the port, future sea level rise, exposure sensitivity, adaptive capacity analysis could be done in this area, and then our climate action strategy all point to this being a really important project on a number of levels. So the city has taken on a few things that are kind of helping move things forward as well. They were able to bring on a consultant to start developing a funding strategy. This is it's a really complicated project. Three different landowners, 3 bridges. There's utilities. It's complicated. It's expensive, and it's going to need a good strategy. And so there's a lot of money out there right now. Some of it is for infrastructure. Some of it's for salmon. And how do we prioritize that? How do we not compete with other grants so we don't waste our time going after something? And so I imagine we'll have to stitch together a number of different sources. We've kicked around looking at some other city projects. Recent city projects. This could be a $20 to $40 million project with these bridges. If we were to, depending on what the alternatives analysis in the future looks at. I don't believe I'm not sure that that's possible to do a full span. I think they would just need to give the creek enough room to move, essentially, and to deal with the floodwaters. The city's been working on a sewer lift station project for a while, and they've got that, I think, up to permitting, and I think it's even budgeted. And that will bury the actual sewer line far enough down that we could allow the creek channel to adjust more appropriately when you remove things that are kind of holding the grade where it is right now, like that concrete line channel. And with the port's support, the city went after a culvert AOP, aquatic organic passage grant, which is it's a grant from the Federal Highway Administration. It's a national culvert removal and restoration grant. And they, $2.3 million to bring it through initial studies up to like a 60% design, kind of permit ready. And that would really, if we could get that project together, and we should know about that funding, I heard the other day by the end of the summer. If that was to come through, that would really help us leverage for other grants, because you'd have a project that was, more or less ready to go.
What did you say you thought the total project cost? You said this is upwards of 30 million.
Well, we haven't done the ROM on that, but based on conversations with the city from some bridge projects they've done recently of similar lengths, we're looking, this is a range, right? $20 to $40 million. It's just bridges of this size with the complexities are not inexpensive, right? And then for that grant, I think it's worth pointing out, letters of support came from, Nooksack Tribe, Lummi Nation, Fish Wildlife Ecology, Puget Sound Partnership, of course, the port, and then Cold Storage and some of our tenants there, Gaston Bay, and then also representatives Larson, Kilmer, Jayapal, and Strickland. So some of the work that engaged the railroad, or the main project that engaged the railroad here is a grant that went to Fish and Wildlife from EPA. And it was a project that looked at all the railroad crossings from Olympia up to the border and developed a methodology and a ranking of importance for addressing these fish passage issues, specifically focused on Chinook salmon. And lo and behold, the Lower Squalicum Creek came in, I believe, like fourth from the top. And so being that it's a spur and not the main line helps with some of the railroad's engagement on this, but they are also very engaged in just this whole project, and we're a main stakeholder in the steering committee for it. We just learned recently that we have ecology funding through the Bellingham Bay Action Team that's in the state budget right now, awaiting the governor's signature. So that would go towards this early feasibility study and alternatives analysis leading to a 60% design, which is really kind of the next step to make sure we make a eyes wide open decision there and have a good basis on why we're pursuing the given design. And then responding to concerns by the tenants down there, we did purchase, I believe it was real estate that purchased some temporary flood barriers. We haven't had a chance to put those in, so we don't know the efficacy of those. And so they're there, and we can deploy those if needed. And so that's kind of a snapshot of where we're at, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I suppose I'd be rather Pollyannish if I said BNSF is going to belly up to the bar when it comes to paying for some of this.
Well, so that's where I've heard the conversation is kind of stalled. They've supported the concept, and they're supportive of work going on, and they've even come up with ways they think they could do it on the main line by batching projects. And so they have staff available, but it's been sort of more of an in-kind match of sorts, but
I knew the answer.
I'm not privy to those conversations. This is what I've heard, but at a certain point, I'm sure that will come up. But no, they haven't stepped up and offered money for their bridge.
Well, it would be nice, but we won't hold our breath. It's at least promising that they are participating. When I heard last, it seemed like a stalemate, that they were not coming to the table at all, and that doesn't appear to be what's happening right now.
Yeah, I think they may have paid some attention to our State Department of Transportation and how the culvert case went, and now that the state is actually, based on that court case, they're replacing culverts and dealing with fish passage issues. So they might have been watching that and seeing that might be better to, be proactive.
Okay. Commissioner Briscoe?
Clarification on Line Creek move. You spoke to
Well, sure, yeah. So not move in that, like a natural system would migrate back and forth across the larger drainage like it had in the past. It's too modified of an environment for that. I mean, again, we have to go through feasibility and alternatives analysis, but I would envision something where there would still be, an armored channel, but it would have more space, and that, there would be more of a natural channel bottom, and so that. Yes, I mean, I can't see it another way around that there. Yeah.
Bobby, you're on mute. Nobody can hear you.
That's okay. That's better that way.
Gary chiming in from the back row.
Yeah, straightening me out again. Carrie, can you give me an automatic mic, please? That was my concern, is if we're going to allow the creek to move, we're going to have erosion problems with the tenants there. So, but that's not what you were speaking to. It's channeling it and opening the channel up at the mouth, so it's like water can get away better.
Yeah, it allows more room for, the tidal activity, but no, I mean, any remedy down there would have to, prevent erosion and,
right.
Keep tight where it is. I think where I was headed with that was that there would be more of a channel that would be able to move in its confines, is I guess what I'm saying, is, the stream itself.
Can they put a upstream a ways? Has there been thought into putting something up there to stop some of the debris upstream that they can get at easier than the bridges there?
So some of the debris that comes down the whole system.
That's a lot of the problem when it floods. It gets jammed up with the debris and backs the water up.
Yeah, I mean, I know West Street catches quite a bit of it right now. I'm not sure beyond that. That's sort of way beyond the scope of this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
There won't be any disruption to Bellingham Cold Storage or any of the operations in the region, as far as you know?
During a project like this? Well, I mean, you'd be putting a new bridge on Rotor.
Are they involved in some of these discussions?
The meeting, the initial meeting we had out to kind of just look at the project, Cold Storage rep was there. Yeah, I mean, I think, when it comes to the flooding and all, they're pretty interested in what's going to happen.
They're
down
aware
there.
of what the plans are, yeah.
Well, there are no plans yet, right? We're looking at feasibility study, alternatives analysis. That's where the kind of more stakeholder engagement comes in, and no plan has been settled on.
I don't mean physical plan, but I mean they know where we're headed, what the end goal is. Yeah.
Yeah, they provided a letter of support for the last grant application.
Great. Okay.
Anything else?
Okay, well, thanks for keeping us updated. It's clearly a complicated mess to navigate through there, but really important work, and we got to hit it when the money's available, and the money's available now, so it's good that we're doing this.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kurt.
Yeah.
All right, that reaches the end of our presentations. We have no action items to vote on today, so we'll move to end of meeting public comment. Anyone in the room who wishes to provide public comment? Anyone on Zoom? Seeing none.
I don't see anybody on Zoom,
Okay.
and nobody is on chat.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. All right, we'll move into the last part of our meeting, other business. Other business, who's got some items? Commissioner Briscoe, appointed Commissioner Bell. We'll let Commissioner Bell go first.
Isn't it amazing that even when Carrie's not here, she's here? There's a looming presence, Carrie. The first thing is I want to let you know that we attended the Allegiant Airlines annual meeting, and quite frankly, it was an amazing meeting. Just from a learning standpoint about how airlines operate and what their philosophy is, and they are mavericks in this industry, and it was a tremendous event. We lobbied hard for a route to Portland. We lobbied hard for a route to Hawaii. We lobbied hard for the direct flight for Commissioner Shepard to go to Mexico. Appreciate that. That was, we're calling it the Mexico route, or the Shepard route. And we got some pretty good feedback, I think, on the Portland route. I think we found a way to fit into their system with that, so I think they're going to give that a serious look. I doubt we're going to get Hawaii. I do believe we're going to get something to Mexico because of a partnership that they established in Mexico. It's not actually a Allegiant airline, but it would be a partnership. So that looked fairly promising. But bottom line, with the Canadian border open and Canadian business beginning to come back into this region, we're back on their radar screen. We're back on the map. They're now looking at our routes seriously. I had a sense that it was an airline that was on its way down at some point, but I think that my reservations about that have been reversed because just their business model right now and the things that they're doing in the future seems to show some growth. They're consistent in their entrepreneurship and their different way of thinking, and it seems to be paying dividends, not just in this market, but other markets. So I was impressed with what we learned from Allegiant. I defer to Rob if there's something I missed on that, but those were my highlights. I think with that, I'll leave it to Commissioner Briscoe because he had a gleam in his eye. Your mic's off.
Yeah, okay. I really don't have anything at this point. There's some stuff coming up. Probably next meeting I'll have, but we got to go a little further down the road with things. So, I mean, you know, we're all engaged in our terminal activity over here and the public outcry, so to speak, to it. I mean, we're of course, we can't talk, but with Rob and staff, we're trying to figure out if we can change things a little bit to help. But other than that, I really don't have anything. We could use a flight to Alaska, though. I mean, we've forgotten about the 49th state. We need to get something direct out of our airport into Anchorage.
They had that.
Yeah, I think they said we're going to wait to see if Briscoe gets reelected before they make any.
I'm not using it, so I don't need it. But we have a huge population of fishermen in Wacaman, Skagit County. Could certainly use a direct flight out of somewhere other than SeaTac. So don't forget that.
Yeah, and I will be.
Neil?
And I will be taking that direct flight to Denver this weekend. On that Saturday flight, we'll report back on how full that plane is and what it looks like on the way back. Interested in that.
Are you taking the Saturday flight both ways?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay. I just wanted to report I got to go on a tour of the Marine Drive property. Thanks to Elliot for a nice tour. I'm excited to see that there's interest in the community for snapping up those buildings. I think it's going to be a great space for some of our business expansion, and glad to have it in our portfolio. Lots of opportunity. There's a whole range of buildings there, and looking forward to seeing what happens there in the future. Carrie, would you give us a quick update about the Container Village and what we expect to see open in the near future?
Sure. I also wanted to just make a quick comment that Paulschen drives the business down at the waterfront, and in 2022, they opened in April 8th, and they did weekends for the first month, and then they closed on September 7th. This year, they're not opening until May 5th, and the first month is just weekends, and then they close September 2nd. So that might be...
You sure they're closing September, not October?
This year, they're closing September 2nd.
All right. What else can
That
we
is
expect
their
to be?
end of season bash. But as the season progresses, they're going to scale back on the hours. But that is their official end of season bash is September 2nd.
And what else can we expect to see open in the near future?
Well, the Container Village pretty much kicks off this Friday, May 5th. So all of our food trucks, and we have 2 more this year, so we have 4 food trucks, and they're all they're going to be open on May 4th. And we have 2 food trucks on Mondays, 2 on Tuesdays, and then the rest of the week we have 4, and they're going to be there from 11 a.m. until 8 p.m. Monday through Sunday. And then all of our other containers, like I said, are going to kick off on May 5th, and they all have their, they all kind of set their own hours, but generally speaking, they should be open around 11 and close between 8 and 11 p.m.
And do we expect the wine tasting and pizza to be open this year, or are these leasing now and gearing up for next?
Yeah, we won't construct those until the off-season. We just didn't get the permits in time to be doing construction now when we're open.
Yeah.
It would have made for a miserable summer of a lot of equipment and people down there. So we pushed that off, and we'll start doing construction of those in the fall.
Okay.
But you are going to see Dig Deep, that mountain bike tours and bike rental, and you'll also see the Portal Putt, the 9-hole mini golf open this summer.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Carrie.
You're welcome.
And I'm willing to wager that Mercy Housing beats Harcourt with their occupancy permit.
And that's the builder of Mercy Housing has that as the corporate goal for this year.
Are you doing a board on that, like the baseball? Are you going to do a board on that?
No, that's just a straight up impressed with the way they're moving, although it's a different product altogether, but
they're moving quick.
They're moving quickly, yeah. And it looks amazing.
Yeah.
And when you think about the number of housing units that we're going to have on that waterfront, it's phenomenal, and I feel good about that legacy.
Okay, well, my last is just for the residents of South Hill, including the ones who came today. I do appreciate you taking time, appreciate you contacting us. Your concerns are important to me and I think to the rest of our team here. And we are continuing to try and find our balance with being a good neighbor, quality of life in the region, and our mission around economic development. So I do really appreciate, I know you have other things you could be doing with your evening, and your input is valuable, and I'm sure we will stay in contact. So thank you very much.
And if you'd like to talk after the meeting, I'm willing to talk with you folks.
Yeah.
And I'll follow that up with the same. We're more than willing to listen. We'd love to hear what you have to say. As soon as you start to insult us, however, communication ends. And so I will say that you can have an open line of dialogue, but if you impugn our motives or you talk about an ulterior motive that we may have, you're not going to hear from us anymore. We supported this, and we are trying to work through the issues very diligently, all of us. And we're listening very carefully to what you have to say, as long as it's civil. But the moment you cross that line and go into attack mode, I have no reason to want to respond to that. An open dialogue is welcome, and I'm more than happy to discuss that with anybody over a cup of coffee or a meeting at any point in time. But don't be insulting. That's my response back. And nothing I've ever said is canned. I think anybody here will tell you that I've got ADD, so I don't have the ability to put anything in a can, let alone keep it there. So there has never been a canned response from me. Thank you.
Anything else, Rob?
Pump track work party on Friday, so if you're bored and you want to go move some dirt, come join Hogan and I.
Okay.
Do I get to drive the backhoe or the cat?
Maintenance doesn't let me operate equipment anymore.
Yeah, probably smart. Okay, we are done. Thank you.